Jason. I'm very happy to have you, Jason. So you're Jason Liu. You're an AI engineer, AI consultant.
Yeah, mostly machine learning engineer, AI consultant, yeah.
Machine learning engineer, AI consultant. Yeah. What's the difference? Like, I think why it's important to say it like that?
Yeah, I think for me at least, machine learning brings me back sort of a longer timeline of my career. I think this AI engineer, AI movement has been sort of rebranded many times, but I still feel much more comfortable considering myself a machine learning engineer first rather than the AI engineer.
So talking about that, what's your background? How did you end up into machine learning, and then how did you kind of do the switch between machine learning and then AI and take this turn?
Yeah, so I studied mathematical physics at the University of Waterloo, and in 2012 or 2013, Andrew Ng basically came out with this machine learning course. And at that time, I didn't really know how to code or do any kind of statistical modeling. And when I finished up that course, I realized, okay, wow, machine learning allows you to basically predict everything except for maybe some parts of physics. And very quickly, machine learning also took over physics. And so to me, that was just sort of a more interesting field of study. And what really interested me at the time was, doing this kind of predictive modeling for things like social networks or social science, and sort of studying the data that is generated by people. And that kind of started my career in doing machine learning, computer vision. Ultimately at Stitch Fix, we did recommendation systems. And around 2020, I basically had a hand injury that made me sort of lose my ability to code. Okay. And so I actually just sort of left tech for 2 years. And then when ChatGPT came out, I was like, oh wow.
It's a big gap. It's a big gap. 2 years without coding, right?
Yeah. And so when ChatGPT came out, I basically realized, oh wow, not only can I basically start coding again, I can also write more. And those are two things I couldn't really do because I just couldn't really type that much. And when that came out, I was like, oh, great, this is the next thing I'm going to start studying up on and start working on and see where that takes me. And now.
But what, 2020?
Yeah. Okay.
And then how did you were an employee or you were a freelancer? Because I think now you're a freelancer.
Yeah.
And when did you decide to go freelancer? And
I didn't really make a decision. I think what happened was once ChatGPT came out, a lot of companies just sort of had a lot of pressure to sort of think about what AI meant for them. And within my network, I had a couple of friends who basically said, hey Jason, our board is telling us to have an AI strategy. I don't know what that means. Can you help me? And I did that a couple of times, and eventually I realized that, oh, you know what? I don't really have to find a job right away. I can probably do this for a little bit. And so I've been on this journey of both being sort of a little bit more on social media and also growing out my consulting business and kind of.
So it went just like that. It wasn't like a decisive choice. It went like that.
Exactly.
Okay. And so I know you because I'm following you on Twitter, and I know you also because you're the creator of a library.
Yeah.
I may have said framework. A library called Instructor.
Yeah.
It's available on GitHub. It's widely used. Can you talk about a little bit about Instructor? What is it for? And then maybe the history of creating a framework. What led you to that choice of we need a tool to do that because there's nothing or whatever?
Yeah. So when I was working with language models, even in 2021, for example, a lot of what we were doing was just asking for JSON, right? But you kind of have to beg and use a lot of tricks to sort of.
Sorry, they were asking for JSON and asking for JSON.
Exactly.
Via JSON.
And then I saw a lot of the different libraries come out once ChatGPT came out that did something very similar. But I wasn't happy with how that interaction worked because you're kind of describing the shape of data as you're sending this request to the language model. But when function calling came out, that was the first time the language model was trained specifically for JSON output. And where you describe the data and where you describe the schema that you care about is now separated. And so for me, that was the opportunity to really come in and make sure that when I build a system that is asking for JSON, the representation is kind of out of band, right? We're not passing around CSV files and parsing out the commas, right? There's a place where the data is, and there's a place where the description is. And that was kind of the main reason why it mattered to me to sort of build this kind of library. And I think a lot of people think about things like structured outputs, and people think about things like context-free grammars as a way of getting the structured out. But to me, that's not really the layer that I care about. What I really care about is making sure that the responses and the data that you provide is structurally correct. And that's not always just going to be a syntactic correctness. It might be semantic correctness. And those things can't be implemented through grammars. And so my goal really is to make sure that, okay, we just have type-safe interfaces for language models.
So it uses Pydantic behind the hood. And I think you're very involved also in Pydantic as well. So, like hand in hand with Pydantic, what is that?
Yeah, I think we chose Pydantic for Python, but we also support a bunch of different other languages. And each language, we basically partner up with whatever is the most popular validation library. So in JavaScript, it's going to be Zod. In Rust, it's going to be Série. And the idea is, we want it to be as backwards compatible with existing code. And now I don't really think about prompts. I don't really think about these kind of how we get the data. All I really care about is those functions that take in inputs and outputs.
So you decided to create a library, and what I really like about Instructor is that it's very low footprint. It's like very transparent in a sense, because you patch your client, and like everything is like very flawless and stuff like that. You don't have to. At my old age, I don't like to install like tons of library, tons of stuff that you don't use, you don't want to use. So it's a decisive choice that you made, because it's not common. I mean, we all know very big frameworks that we won't say the name, but that are doing everything. And what led you to do that kind of?
So
is it laziness? No, because I think it's maybe more difficult to do that kind of stuff.
I think there's something to do with the ego, right? I think, for me, I had been working on internal frameworks at companies for a long time, and I kind of know what kind of mistakes I had made during that time. And, if you build these large frameworks within an organization, they are forced to use this framework because this is the mandate of the platform team, or this is the mandate of the engineering team. But for me, what I wanted to show was, I want to make a library that is easy to try out in your system, right? You have a client, and then all you do is you change the one keyword argument, right? So really 2 lines of code. But it's also very easy to delete. If you decide that you want to build something from scratch, you delete 2 lines of code.
You don't have to like unplug all the spaghetti code of kind of stuff which is strongly linked and coupled with your existing code.
Exactly. And so for me, my goal is really, not only do I want to build a library that is easy to incrementally upgrade, I want it to be easy to
unplug,
downgrade.
Yeah. I got it.
That was like the core design principle.
That's very cool. And it has grown quite a lot. It's very useful. We received another guy you may know, whose name is Rémi Louf from .txt, and a French guy created .txt and a library called Outlines. In which way, I think it's interesting, in which way Instructor and Outlines are different, because I think they are, and maybe at like the level of which the structuration of the like the constraint come up into the library.
Yeah, to me, for example, constraint sampling, or how we get the structure back out, is an implementation detail I don't really think too much about, or should want to have to think too much about it, right? Whether it is fine-tuning, whether it's a grammar, whether it's a regular expression that we're sampling out, that doesn't really matter. For me, the most important thing is figuring out the ergonomics, and also just making sure that we have good documentation to sort of teach people how we should think about programming. Like, my ultimate goal is to push LLM programming in a certain direction where I think types and structure and validation is the key design principle. I think that the simpler delineation really is the fact that while Instructor does support open source models through things like Ollama or CVP, we're leaning on those implementations to get that structure. So if you sort of use things like Gemini or Anthropic or OpenAI, it's really easy to use Instructor. If you're loading these models from Hugging Face, for example, directly, then that's where I see Outlines being the winner there.
Yeah. And now that we see all the big vendors creating these out-of-the-box structured output, strict mode, JSON mode, and all that stuff, what are you thinking about all this, because there is a simple bias, which is to say, as the vendors implement these structured output, it's gonna put out of order or out of business, whatever. It's a framework, but it will lead to being an interesting to use this kind of framework. I'm not sure about it because I still use Instructor, but what do you thoughts about that?
Yeah, so two things. The advent of something like structured outputs from OpenAI, for example, has not changed the growth at all of Instructor. And so we still have like a 30% month-over-month growth. It's a straight line going upwards.
Okay.
That's one thing. The second thing is there's no business, so you can't go out of business.
Yeah.
And then thirdly, for me at least, like I care more about being right in the design of that system rather than the success of that system, right? If 3 years from now, no one's using Instructor, but now all language models are working with structured outputs, to me, I just feel good that I was able to sort of build out the documentation that way. The second thing too is that, again, all those details end up being implementation details, right? And that's a different level of abstraction than the one I want to work with, which is again just sort of how we work with language models. Whether it's strict mode, function calling, constraint sampling, I don't think the developer should really have to care. In the same way that when I write SQL, ideally, I don't really care if it's MySQL or Postgres or if it's like, again, some other system. I want to sort of define what the SQL looks like rather than how we define like B trees in a database.
Yeah,
That's again how I think about that interaction pattern.
Yeah, I got it. And there was this OpenAI Dev Day that you and I went to. It was yesterday. They announced a lot of different stuff, among them like 4 different main features, which are prompt caching, like their real-time API, their vision fine-tuning, and also model distillation. Like if you should pick 2, not 1, but 2. And also maybe explain a bit these 4 features, which are features which could be also available for other large language model, which is a very standard feature. But maybe for people who are listening to us with your background, can like explain to us with human understandable words. What is that?
Sounds good.
Try it.
So the first one I think is going to be the thing that's going to benefit everyone right away is just prompt caching.
Yeah.
Right. So instead of explicitly defining how we want to cache things like in the Gemini API or the Anthropic API, OpenAI will just use some kind of prefix matching to automatically cache things for you.
Okay.
And so what this means is if I have long instructions or long transcripts of data I want to make multiple requests to, you should just see an automatic savings there.
So it's just like, look at your prompt, and whenever you have prompt that it has already seen, it just use that kind of...
Exactly. So as long as you move all the data that changes at the end of your prompt, you're going to see a win right there. And that's a 50% reduction in cost for any time you do something like that. So I think that's going to be the thing that benefits everybody. The second thing...
They talk to your pocket. They talk to your wallet.
Exactly. The second thing would be the vision fine-tuning API, which I'm very excited about.
Okay.
I think a lot of agent actions that used to use something like a DOM, for example, to render things can now both use the DOM and the screen to start taking actions. And so I think there's going to be a lot more like models that take actions against screens, for example.
Or real world?
It could be the real world
like
too. I think less about that kind of stuff.
IoT stuff, robotic stuff. Do you think they're also thinking about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you think about agents, for example,
so fine-tuning, vision fine-tuning.
Yeah.
It's like you take vision, pre-trained model vision, which are like good at whatever you want, recognizing whatever you want, and then you fine-tune this with data set, which are your data set, like labels and very very fine-tuned, and then the model become better at recognizing this kind of stuff. Am I right?
A more specific example would be this. Most image models are trained on image captioning data.
Yeah.
Not all tasks are image captioning tasks. And so there is a whole separate other task of, maybe like, given what you see, like, ask me thoughtful questions about the scene, as a different task than just describing what that scene is, right? And again, by having fine-tuning, we can now allow users to move away from this task description, this image description task into more specific things, right? The reason why Copali is successful, which is a document-based model, is because those models are trained to understand document structure. Whereas, again, if you just put into GPT-4, you might get some captioning, you might get some table of contents out, but something that's more task-specific is going to be very exciting.
Which is very interesting because vision model and this multimodality is very important and is very strongly linked with structured output. Because most of the time you want to recognize documents and stuff into document, and then you have this structured output that you want to apply, and then the intelligence of the large language model on that.
Yeah, if you think of a e-commerce application, you can imagine sending it a photo and asking the language model, say, hey, I want a list of JSON objects where you're going to give me the coordinates of a box that encloses that image, and then I want you to give me a text description of that image that I can embed to then find similar products, right?
Yeah.
The base API cannot do that, but now with this kind of data, there's a good chance we could actually train a model that can help us do that kind of object detection as well as search, for example.
And now, model distillation, what that thing?
Yeah, so I think a lot of the time, what we want to do is we want to be able to use the outputs of a larger model to train a smaller model.
Like O1, for instance, or
exactly
bigger model.
Yeah, so we can train like O1, we can train that, take that data, and take that output, and then fine-tune potentially, not just 4.0, but 4.0 mini. And the idea is that if we have these very task-specific outputs, and the O1 outputs are correct, then your 4.0 mini task is going to perform a lot better.
So, if you use a smaller model for your tasks, that means also that you're going to reduce your cost, and it's maybe also on an energy footprint that could be, we don't know, less than using a very, very big, good at whatever you want, large language model like a GPT O1 or stuff like that. Okay, and then there is a real-time. Did you see the demo? When Romain Huet just asked to order 400 strawberries, and then it transformed into, okay, I do that. It's voice to voice, mainly voice to voice, bringing voice to apps and making voice interactions very simple programmatically for developers, kind of.
Yeah, I'm disappointed that there's no Python API just yet. I think it's all just JavaScript. But
oh yeah, I saw that.
I'm waiting for the Python starter kit so I can try playing with.
Okay, it's only available for JavaScript right now.
Yeah, unless someone out there what's it called, figures out how to implement the Python version themselves. But I think my understanding is not only is WebSockets still challenging to develop with, there's going to be a lot of tools I think that will show people. What the challenges are and then also how to fix them. So I'm pretty excited for that. Yeah,
because under the hood, it works with WebSocket. Yeah. You can interrupt the voice. Yeah. So it keep buffer and stuff like item count and stuff in memory so that you can catch up with where you interrupted the voice and the interaction.
Yeah, and you're also sending in not only text, but when the language model replies, it sends both text and audio. Yeah. So the text is coming in terms of tokens, and then the audio is coming in terms of byte buffers that represent the audio. Yeah. And they actually send larger and larger chunks of audio, so your time to first token still is low.
And I gotta need to be sync and all that stuff under the hood. So great. And talking about there is something which has been very, very important in 2024. Especially during the AI World Fair in San Francisco in last June, everybody was talking about RAG, and I can recall that you said RAG was really something that's going be very important in 2024 and afterwards, and you decided as a consultant to put an emphasis on RAG. Can you tell me? Can you tell us more about this?
Yeah.
First of all, what is RAG if people don't know yet what is RAG?
So the general idea is, if you use ChatGPT today, it has some knowledge that it has access to. Because they've also implemented some kind of web browsing, it is able to access some kind of public information that is accessible. But most of these language models do not have the ability to access your private data. And so a lot of companies care about two things. One, accessing their private data, but two, being able to search across that data to then potentially take some other action. For example, there's a lot of companies that want to, given a bunch of PDFs from a data room, do some kind of due diligence report. Right? And maybe those things don't fit in context today, but maybe we care about it working today rather than just waiting for this like magical moment when context doesn't matter anymore. And to me, at least, since my background has been mostly in building recommendation systems, I have a lot of experience thinking about things like how do we do search, how do we do relevancy, how do we collect the data from human labelers to figure out what is and is not a good recommendation. And it turns out RAG just feels like recommendation systems, where instead of having a user and products and movies or clothes, it's actually an LLM being sent pieces of text and pieces of instructions. And that process has basically looked very similar for the most part.
Interesting. So yeah, it's because of your background in recommendation system that RAG kind of ring a bell into your brain and makes it like, yeah, this is interesting.
Exactly.
Because you mix like the LLM and the recommendation system and you bring knowledge and semantics.
Yeah, and effectively what it looks like so far is I've just taken everything that I've done for the past 8 years with recommendation systems and replaced smaller and smaller components with language models.
Yeah.
And so the real question is, okay, I used to work with $500,000 budgets on doing data labeling for relevancy. Well, now we can just train an LLM as a judge. But the training manual that I used to write for the person is the same thing I'm going to send to the LLM.
Yeah.
Right? What does relevancy look like? How do you compare two things? What are the tricks that we can use to make sure the data we generate is correct or diverse? Those are all kind of things that we're applying from like the human world down to the LLM.
So a kind of LLM becomes the master of all trades in this kind of system, like doing lots of different stuff at different level.
Yeah.
Okay. And so you've built a course about RAG. And so I think this was this summer that you built that stuff. Yeah. And you launched it. You've launched it recently. Can you tell us more about this RAG course?
Yeah.
What the objective, the main goal, and how do you organize that? Because we can say a lot of different stuff online, and I think it's interesting that you can tell us how you think that thing.
Yeah. So yeah, during the summer we basically launched the first version of that course. We're taking that feedback and also some of the new updated tech tools like Copilot and prompt caching, and we'll build in a new version for February. And it kind of comes in 2 parts, and each part is 3 weeks long. So the first part...
Is it online?
It's online, yeah, it's on Maven. Okay. And so the first part is going to be thinking about how we generate synthetic data to then evaluate how good the retrieval is. I think too many people see the generation and they want to play around with the generation, but really if the language model isn't able to see the data that has the correct answer, generation does not matter. And so the first part is really focusing on having good information retrieval and having really good precision and recall. Then it's about making sure that we are building a product that collects feedback data. So now there's a UX and design perspective that
for
helps
the
us
user
collect user data.
Yeah.
And then we then use that user data to synthetically augment it to create more training data. And if you do this flywheel well enough, now you go from a product to a product that generates data to a product that takes that data, augments it, and then trains better retrievers.
And become better.
Exactly. So that's the first part. The second part is where most of my consulting has come in. A lot of companies build a prototype, they release it, they might go viral, and all of a sudden they come to me and they say, hey, Jason, we're losing customers, or we went viral, but people don't want to sign up because it's hallucinating or something like that.
Okay.
So then the second part of that course is about how do we break down the system that's a prototype into many components, almost like you're auditing an assembly line. And then what you can do is you can say, well, if there are 10 components, which one is the bottleneck? Which one is taking on the most traffic? Which one has the lowest satisfaction? For example, if it's low satisfaction and low traffic, maybe we just change the prompt to tell it we don't want to answer these kinds of questions. If it's low traffic and high satisfaction, maybe we should promote that in the UX. And so the question
you mean that during your consultancy work, you've seen a lot of your vision is like lots of clients are having problems with their RAG systems at one point of their workflow, one point of their system or another, or maybe several points. And that depending on where the pain point is, you got a specific response and a specific way of tackling this problem.
Yeah, we have to segment this problem into multiple groups and then tackle each one individually. And the idea is like, first, how do we segment? Then how do we improve an individual group? And thirdly, how do we combine that again into a single cohesive language model system, right? So it's about segmentation, building individual indices to make those improvements, and then using language models and routers to build a cohesive single interface.
So it's a kind of do-it-yourself, fix-it, RAG kind of stuff course, so that you give all your feedback about what you've seen, like worst practice, best practice, and
exactly.
And you give that matter and you give that value to the people who are taking your course.
Yeah, and the idea is like if we take this over a 6-week period, for example, we can actually sort of teach you something. We can do office hours to answer questions, and then we can sort of watch everyone work through these problems with their own data. So this is less of a course for students or hobbyists, but really a course for professionals that need to really improve the systems they're building.
Yeah. And during your consultancy, you saw like lots of, because I have a lot of clients who have many POCs, many proof of concepts, whatever. One of our clients said once, I want to get rid of my proof of concept factory, because just like we only have POCs everywhere.
Yeah.
And do you see also that kind of stuff that companies are very good at doing POC, but then afterwards when it comes to implementing and scaling and putting that into productions and keeping that, like maintaining that, and having it like used by user with feedback and stuff like that, like a real product, it's very difficult.
Yeah, I think because most of the work that's being done is being done by software engineers, it's very easy to sort of follow some blog posts and get something where if I put in some input, I get an output, right? But just because you loose the arrow doesn't mean it hits its target. And so I think
like
what
the
happens
minimum viable stuff.
Exactly. It gives me an answer, which is very different than gives me a good answer. Or it gives me a good answer and allows me to give it feedback so it can improve over time.
Oh, it gives me like hundreds of good answers for many different clients at the same time.
Exactly. And so again, a lot of it is, really understanding that for classical software systems, you can build it once and it can sort of run forever, right? But with something like an AI system, things are changing all the time. Your user behavior is changing all the time. You could run a marketing campaign, get a completely different set of users that ask different questions that you've never foreseen. And so how do you, detect that? How do you monitor that? And then how do you sort of build out a new segment of your capabilities? And how do you connect that back into your end-to-end system? And so what happens
this kind of system are more and more non-deterministic as well. So we need also to shift our vision, to shift our point of view for this kind of system, because sometimes I discuss with people who are used to the old kind of vision, like you have A in input, you have B in output, you have like very clear, deterministic kind of thing of software engineering. With LLM, it's very different, right?
Yeah, a lot of it is too many people are thinking about features that they want to build for a system rather than running experiments and then using your experimentation as a way to search through what is possible. I think that's the big transition between what a software engineer does versus what a machine learning engineer has done for a long time. And I think a lot of the machine learning engineers that are very good are still happy working at like the Amazon, Netflix, and the Metas of the world, and have not really been able to have a big impact on this like AI engineer field because it feels too new, really.
So how long is this course on RAG? Like 4 weeks?
We were thinking between 4 weeks and 6 weeks, but I think we've ultimately arrived at 6 weeks just so we can, one, have more office hours, and two, just let people really have the time they need to make sure they can actually implement some of these ideas.
And what are your main targets in terms of clients, like a small and medium business or bigger businesses, bigger companies?
Yeah, I think if you already have that POC, that is a perfect time to come in. Because you have enough of a system that can actually collect that feedback, and now we can start measuring success and actually implementing some of these things.
So it's not a question of company size or client company size, but much more which phase you are into the building of your product, like your post-poke kind of stuff.
Exactly. Like this is not a course that is going to be from like a 0 to 0 to 1, right? This is really the course that says, this is the process you're going to learn that you're going to just redo over and over again until you IPO.
Yeah.
Right. The goal is like you learn this playbook and you just reapply it like every quarter until you can sort of prioritize what you need to build next.
And you're doing it alone or with other people in your company? Because I think you're not alone. You said
I'm doing it by myself now, mostly because I think a lot of the new information, a lot of the demonstrations, I'm going to build out a team so we can have like more assignments, more work that we can share, and also better demos that we can share with the team.
Are you used to like kind of give lesson and insight like that and it's like teaching to people, stuff like that? You did that?
Yeah, I've been doing this for like 10 years now. I think a lot of the time, when I was at Waterloo, I was doing a lot of talks on like how to use like scikit-learn and PyTorch and how to use pandas. And so it's always been a fun time to sort of take everything I know and be able to distill it back to an audience.
Talking about scikit-learn, we received in our podcast Gaël Varroco, who is one of the co-founder of scikit-learn. Let's go back to Instructor a bit because I saw in your changelog, maybe I'm the one like crazy weirdo of looking at the changelog, but whatever. And you have a new feature which are really cool. I think one of them is like Jinja templating. Yep. But you have different kind of stuff. Like, could you tell us more about the latest feature?
Yeah, so when I develop this library, I also develop it in conjunction with a lot of client work. And so what you see as Instructor, the open source library is a very small subset of what is the sort of private forks for individual clients.
Okay.
And so when
you
I
have
add
a lot of different secret weapon, other kind of feature under the hood.
Exactly. And so what I do is like, now when I bring something into Instructor, it's probably going to be 6 months, 7 months behind.
Yeah.
But I now know this is something that's never going to change again.
Yeah.
Right? Because I've already proven out.
You've been using it with like clients or other kind of stuff. That's something that is mature enough to go into the framework.
Yeah, it's not something I'm going to add in and then remove later, a year afterwards and like break backwards compatibility. And it comes in 2 parts. So the first part is just introducing some kind of basic Jinja templating. So most companies have already done that. The nuance here is that when we actually apply these template variables to a prompt, these same template variables are accessible by the Pydantic validators. And so if I tell the prompt, here are 10 URLs that you have access to, write me a document that links to these 10 URLs, my validator can now also say, write a regular expression, find all the URLs, and make sure all those URLs are in the list of allowed URLs, for example.
It's really great because when you're building your prompts, it was really a pain in the ass. I mean, like this templating system is going to be really, really cool. Really, really cool. Other news?
I think that's basically it for now. I think a lot of it is going to be around just refactoring the code base, preparing for Instructor 2.0, and most of that will just be allowing users to have more visibility and observability into the systems.
Yeah.
So just building out hooks for stuff
and
like
there's help with like a Pydantic Logfire? Is it Logfire?
Yeah, whether it's Logfire or Braintrust or Langsmith or just OpenTelemetry and Datadog, the idea is that we want to basically allow everyone to have some kind of hook into the system.
Which is important.
Yeah. I've been building machine learning systems for like 8 years, and the most important part for me has always been observability. And so just giving more, now that I have more features in the tool, I want to make sure that we have the ability to inspect them. Whereas before, there's really nothing to look at except for the messages.
Yeah. It's a tricky question, right? What are you the most excited about, like, for this new last quarter of 2024? It seems like it's been 100 years in 2024. I don't know for you, but it's like crazy.
Oh, I mean, I was working a lot for the first like 6-8 months of this year, but now I'm a little bit more relaxed. Honestly, I think the thing I'm excited for the most is actually just building out a community of other like independent consultants. So if you've seen my Twitter recently, a lot of it has been like, let me help you sort of organize your business.
And you do these office hours, and there is one this evening.
Yeah,
of course.
And so I think in the next couple of years, I think there's going to be a lot more individual consultants or individual machine learning experts who can do freelance work at very high leverage, right? And so one of the things I'm working on in the past couple of weeks is really sort of building up that community and helping each other out, and, you know, sort of capitalize on the AI wave, right? This is like my third one. This is my third AI wave, and it's the first one I've been doing this independently, and so it's been, you know, very fun to do that, but it's also like very lonely at times, where there's not many people that you can talk to. I think I talked to Hamel, but that's almost it, right? And so building out this community has been very a fun time.
And for the record, you use a coding assistant?
Oh, everything, yeah.
Which one do you use? Like, now the big question is not what's your stack, but what's your coding assistant, because...
Yeah, I would say most of my work is going to be using either Claude projects or Cursor with Sonnet 3.5.
Okay.
Yeah, I think 01 is a little bit too slow, and for what I usually want to change, it's pretty quick to just use Sonnet.
And it's a question. I mean, we see these coding assistants that are becoming more and more capable as the LLM becomes more and more capable. What do you think is going to happen within the next year or so for what we call software engineering? Isn't there a risk that it's a major risk for software engineering, like sowing the branch on which software engineering all the industry sit? And what's your opinion about that? Because there is that, I don't know if you saw the tweet of Davin and Maya Hansen recently, who said well, it's really cool, but I just want to let this kind of assistant to just be assistant because I love coding, I love programming. Yeah. And when I delegate this kind of stuff, it also takes me what I love to do, and I don't like it. Yeah. So what's your opinion about that?
I'm not too, worried about this kind of stuff. I'm a ceramicist as well. I make pottery. Okay. And the presence of injection plastic and molds does not impact my ability to express myself as a creative person. I think, for code at larger companies, there's definitely a risk of sort of junior developers not really having the opportunity to contribute there. But I think what's going to really happen is there's going to be just more individuals who are building things for themselves, right?
Yeah, but I don't think company where you get, for instance, 3 or 4 software engineers, now they will be able to do the work of 6, maybe, with this kind of stuff. So it's gonna have a major impact on the global market for software engineering.
Yeah, I think this is what's gonna happen. So first of all, I don't really profit from saying hyperbolic things, so I don't really need to say things like, oh, they're just gonna take over all the jobs. The average dollar per employee is going to go up, and what's going to happen, I think, that there's going to be more people open to doing this kind of work, and that's going to be the balance of how these things. We're going to be more productive, and the question is, if I want to make more revenue, I still need to hire maybe a couple more people, but maybe I don't have to because I'm actually able to maintain a business with a couple of employees. Yeah. Very weird time to live in. I'm excited. Without language models, I would not be able to write. I would not be able to code because of my hand issues. And as a result of chat models, I've been able to, start my consulting firm, start with initial blogs. Now I also hire actual coders and actual writers, right? I still see the value of doing that kind of work, but it's just going to change just a little bit, right? I think every generation there's always some fear of the new technology. Where there's still going to be gas cars in 20 years. There's going to be people who still write with a pen. There's going to be ceramicists that make art, and there's going to be people who run businesses, injection molding plastic to make paper plates and whatnot. I think we're all going to be able to find our niche. So kind of optimistic in the long term. Yeah, in the long term. Thank you very much, Jason. It was really, really nice having you. No problem. Thanks for having me. It's our first in English for me, and here in San Francisco. Jason Liu, thank you very much for being here. Thank you. Cool.